टाइम मैनेजमेंट फॉर दिस ग्रुप। मैं सोचती हूँ कि जो टाइम है वो आपकी साइकोलॉजिकल स्टेटस के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है। आपका मूड कैसा है? आप सैड हो, इसका मतलब आप एंग्शियस हो, आप डिप्रेस्ड हो, आपके पास दूसरे के लिए नेगेटिव फीलिंग्स है। नेगेटिव फीलिंग्स का मतलब ये है कि यू आर हेटिंग, यू हैव दैट एंगर, आपको जेलसी है, आप अच्छा नहीं सोचते उसके बारे में। दूसरी चीज ये है कि आप जब न्यूट्रल है, एक आप जब पॉजिटिव है, जब आप पॉजिटिव हैं तो आप देखेंगे कि आप हैप्पी हैं और you know everything is good for you. So I feel like when you wait for somebody, आपको 1 मिनट भी घंटे जैसा लगता है कि नहीं लगता? आप हैप्पी हैं और आपको कुछ अच्छे काम करने में मन लग रहा है, आपका वही जुनून है, तो आपको ऐसा लगता है समय का पता ही नहीं चलता। जब आप पेन में हैं तो आपको लगता है अरे कितना टाइम बीत ही नहीं रहा। उसी तरह से आप जब किसी तरह सैड हैं तो आपको लगता है टाइम बढ़ जाता है। आपको कहीं ट्रेन में जाना है और प्लेन में जाना है तो ऐसा लगता है समय भाग रहा है। तो सब आपके मूड के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है, आप कैसे उसको रिसीव करते हो। टाइम वही है, कार्य वही है, बट आप कैसे रिसीव करते हो उसके ऊपर है। एक छोटा सा और एग्जाम्पल है, एक एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं कि ऊपर वाले ने एक अकाउंट खोला आपके लिए स्पेशल, उसमें 8,640 रुपए डाले और उन्होंने नियति को बोला और राहुल को बोला कि भाई आज आपके अकाउंट में इतने पैसे डाले हैं, रुपए डाले, इसको आपको बढ़िया तरह से अच्छे कामों में यूज करना है और जितना आप नहीं यूज कर पाओगे वो लैप्स हो जाएंगे आपके। आप कोशिश करते हो, अगर आपकी पहचान है कि आप आज का काम कल पे टालते हो तो आपके ज्यादातर पैसे वेस्ट ही हो जाएंगे। हमारा आलस्य दूसरे दिन पे टालना, उसको बोलते हैं प्रोक्रेस्टिनेशन। ठीक है, हर चीज को नेगेटिव सोचना, पता नहीं ऊपर वाले की क्या मर्जी है इसमें, इस अकाउंट में, तो आप देखेंगे उसका अच्छा यूटिलाइजेशन नहीं होगा। एक बार आपका समय चला जाए, उसी तरह से समय भी 1 सेकंड आपके 1 रुपए के बराबर है। आपको 1 रुपए बेकार चला जाए आपको बुरा लगता है, पर आपको 1 सेकंड क्या हजारों सेकंड खराब हो जाए आपको बुरा नहीं लगता। इसको सोचिए, ये सबसे बड़ी दौलत है। दौलत तो फिर भी आप कमा सकते हैं, पर आप समय को दोबारा किसी भी पैसे से, किसी भी जरूरत से खरीद नहीं सकते। कहते हैं 80 साल की एक लाइफ दी जाती है, उसमें आदमी को खाली 10 साल ही मिलते हैं कुछ करने के लिए, कुछ लेगेसी छोड़ने के लिए, कुछ अपना नाम बनाने के लिए। 28 साल तो वो सो के बिता देता है और 8-10 साल जो है अपना खाना खाने में और अपनी डेली एक्टिविटीज में बिता देता है। 5-6 साल पढ़ने के लिए, 10-12 साल पढ़ने में मिनिमम लग जाते हैं, नौकरी ढूंढने में 5 साल लग जाते हैं। तो इस तरह कहने के 10 साल ही है आपके ना। उसका अगर जो आदमी फोकस्ड है उसको यूटिलाइज करेगा और वो सफल हो जाएगा, हर चीज में उसका नाम होगा। और जो आदमी उसकी कीमत नहीं समझ आ रहा वो सफल हो जाएगा, बाद में बिना बात को ब्लेम करता रहेगा कि इन्होंने ये किया, इन्होंने किया, इसलिए मैं नहीं कर पाया। कबीर का दोहा हमें याद रहना चाहिए, काल करे सो आज कर, आज करे सो अब, कब पल में परलय होगी भूल करेगा कब। तो आई थिंक उस चीज को हमें ध्यान रखना है कि ये हमारा पास सबसे बड़ी कीमत है समय। इसका समय का पूरा यूटिलाइजेशन करना चाहिए। और जिसने एक बार कीमत समझ ली और जिसने अपना ये जान लिया कि कौन मेरा टाइम वेस्ट करते हैं और किस तरह से मैं अपना टाइम वेस्ट करती हूँ, तो टाइम का लॉग बनाना बहुत जरूरी है। नियति खासकर आपके लिए, इसको आपको ध्यान में देना है, इसलिए मैंने सोचा था कि मैं आपके लिए बात करूंगी। धन्यवाद मुझे सुनने के लिए।
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Now let's talk irritable bowel syndrome. बहुत कम लोग इसके बारे में जानते हैं।
Yes.
और इसका सबको जानना बहुत जरूरी है कि ये इरिटेबल बाउल सिंड्रोम है क्या। तो हम आज आपको सुनेंगे और हमारे सब क्रिस्टल क्लियर सब चीजें हो जाएंगी। इसके एंड में आपने 10 क्वेश्चंस डालने हैं इरिटेबल बाउल सिंड्रोम के लिए, जिससे कि हम लोगों को क्लैरिटी होनी चाहिए कि जब भी आपको इरिटेबल बाउल सिंड्रोम की बात हो तो उनको इन 10 पॉइंट्स को याद करना चाहिए। ओवर टू यू राहुल।
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Is clear.
अभी आया नहीं है but
So we'll be discussing multiple topics today, and I have tried to make these topics in a very brief and crisp fashion. For any doubts, just please switch on your mic in between and ask. So the first topic, good morning everyone. Let's start discuss first topic of AC inhibitors versus angiotensin receptor blockers. So these drugs we wanted to discuss them in little more detailed version because they're wonderful drugs, have been almost prescribed to everyone having diabetes or hypertension, and little more we wanted to know about them. So myself, Dr. Rahul Jain, and these lectures are being held against under the guidance of Dr. Sharda Jain. So let's go about it. So first is AC inhibitors, that is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, and on the other side we have angiotensin receptor blockers. So each and every point is very important. So first point is AC inhibitors are prils. So all my prils are captopril, enalapril, fosinopril, perindopril, lisinopril. They're all AC inhibitors, while all my sartans are angiotensin receptor blockers. So first is name. Second, it's the similarities between both of them. They both are teratogenic. They both have hyperkalemia side effect. They both are useful in hypertension, cardiac remodeling, and diabetic nephropathy. So what is important is in diabetic nephropathy, there is something called as mesangial cell proliferation. So they help to reduce that. So now what is more important is why angiotensin receptor blockers are superior than AC inhibitors. So because of these side effects which are related to bradykinin accumulation, and those side effects are angioedema, anaphylaxis, skin rash and dry cough. So we will discuss each and every mechanism, that why there is hyperkalemia side effect, why there is bradykinin accumulation. So in next slide, we can see this is the normal mechanism. So this angiotensin.
We can't see the slide. There's no slides.
So there are no slides.
No. We have not got a single slide.
Now it's coming.
No. अभी आया नहीं है, आएगा. लिखा है डॉक्टर राहुल जैन इज प्रेजेंटिंग, पर आया नहीं है. अब आया है, आप दोबारा शुरू करो इसको. बड़ा करो. हाँ, अब आया. अब इसको दोबारा शुरू करो बेटा.
Yes. It's coming now.
अब आया है, बट हाँ पुराने वाले नहीं देखे. यस, दिस इज गुड.
Okay. Then I'll start from beginning. Only.
Yes.
So yes, today we'll start with the discussion of AC inhibitors versus ARBs. This is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. So these drugs, we wanted to discuss them in little more detailed manner because they're almost prescribed to everyone having diabetes and hypertension. And I will introduce myself here, Dr. Rahul Jain, and these lectures are happening under the guidance of Dr. Sharda Jain. So without much further ado, I'll go on to the first slide, that is discussing the AC inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers, and we will read about their similarities as well as their differences. So first is which are the drugs which are AC inhibitors. So all my prils, captopril, enalapril, fosinopril, perindopril, lisinopril, all these drugs are AC inhibitors, and sartans are telmisartan, candesartan, irbesartan. So These drugs are useful in cardiac remodeling, hypertension, and diabetic nephropathy, and they both have side effects of hyperkalemia. What is interesting is that angiotensin receptor blockers are more superior over ACE inhibitors for the reason that they do not cause bradykinin accumulation, and because of bradykinin, there is dry cough, angioedema, and skin rashes, even anaphylaxis. So, why these things happening? Why they, for everything there is a reason. We'll study everything and we'll also understand. We'll try to understand the mechanism behind each. So yes, so this is the mechanism and how it works. So we need to know that angiotensinogen is something which is released by liver, and then it gets converted to angiotensin 1 by renin, which is present in kidney, and then this ACE, which I'm giving drug for, ACE inhibitors, are present in lungs. And then finally there's something called as angiotensin 2, which acts on receptors. So the other drug is receptor blocker. So what is interesting to know here is that this angiotensin converting enzyme also decomposes bradykinin. So the moment I give ACE inhibitor, this bradykinin will also stop getting metabolized, and this starts accumulating. That's why I get the side effects of dry cough, angioedema, and skin rash.
Correct.
Then yes, and then if I give AT2 receptor blocker, angiotensin receptor blocker, this ACE still keeps functioning, and that's why there is bradykinin metabolism keeps happening normally, and there is no bradykinin accumulation. Then coming to hyperkalemia. So why there is hyperkalemia with ACE inhibitors and ARBs? So the normal mechanism is this, that already discussed this, that liver is releasing angiotensinogen, which gets converted to angiotensin 1 by renin, which is present in kidney. Then angiotensin converting enzyme is present in lungs, which is converting it into angiotensin 2, and that angiotensin 2 having multiple actions. So angiotensin 2 actually is causing vasoconstriction and increasing BP. So that is why we are trying to inhibit the formation of angiotensin 2, or maybe its action, so that this increased BP does not occur. And how does it increase BP? One mechanism is vasoconstriction. The second mechanism is sodium and water reabsorption and retention. So the moment there is no sodium and water reabsorption, there is sodium loss, and that is why the side effect is hyperkalemia. So even hyponatremia also I can write. So hyponatremia and hyperkalemia. So yes, now going back to the main slide which we started as. So one is the things we wanted to understand is why there is hyperkalemia as a side effect and why there is bradykinin accumulation. So I hope both the things are very clear. So the reason is the bradykinin accumulates because the metabolism of bradykinin also acts via angiotensin converting enzyme. And there is hyperkalemia because the normal action of angiotensin 2 is sodium and water retention. But when I block that action, the potassium gets reabsorbed more, and so side effect comes as hyperkalemia. So yes, this much only about ACE inhibitors and ARBs. And then one more topic which we were not clear yesterday were paradoxical and mass hypertension. So I added one slide to explain them more. So yes, so coming to only paradoxical hypertension and mass hypertension. So this these terminologies come under a special category, and this paradoxical hypertension, as the name suggests, is when BP rises after starting treatment. So that's why the term paradoxical. So even after I started treatment for hypertension, the BP is still rising. The next time the patient comes to me, I see the BP has even increased before. So there are very specific causes for behind these paradoxical hypertension. So what is interesting to know that in case of unilateral renal artery stenosis, the only one side, the drug of choice for those patients are ACE inhibitors. But the moment it becomes bilateral renal artery stenosis, it is a contraindication, ACE inhibitors.
All right.
So if a patient has bilateral renal artery stenosis and we give the patient ACE inhibitors, that person will show paradoxical hypertension.
Okay.
Then one possibility is a person who has been a diabetic and maybe had some heart issue and is on beta blockers. Beta blockers meaning my propranolol or maybe esmolol or maybe bisoprolol, metoprolol, atenolol, all those drugs. So if a patient is on those drugs and he's also hypertensive and now he's developing hypoglycemia, so that hypoglycemia, we had studied this in diabetes session, that hypoglycemia causes counter-regulatory hormone surge, which is also a mechanism associated in Somogyi phenomena, if you recall. So this counter-regulatory hormone increase will cause my hypertension at that moment. So where one more scenario where paradoxical hypertension is seen, and even pheochromocytoma where the first drugs are alpha blockers, not beta. So if a person has been started on beta blockers for some reason, there he will develop paradoxical hypertension. These are the reasons that there was a need to make a protocol for following hypertension treatment. So one should not start at first drug as beta blocker to anyone.
Anytime you find that the treatment hypertension is increasing, you should think about whether it's a bilateral renal artery stenosis, whether you are dealing with pheochromocytoma where the blood pressure will be very high, and thirdly is it one of those Somogyi and the other phenomenon you get?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So these are the possibilities. So yes, it is actually a clue that the patient should be screened out for these diseases before giving them the treatment. So then, this was the interesting entity we were discussing about yesterday in session as well.
To remind Niyati, the Somogyi phenomenon was that we want to find out whether the insulin given in the night is more or less. If you find if it is more, but in that the counter hormones will be increased. And you'll find early mornings at 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock blood sugars will be markedly low. In that particular case, don't increase the night insulin. But in case you find that you've given an insulin and 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock blood sugars are high, in that particular case, you increase the dose of insulin in the night. Clear?
Yes, yes. So then mass hypertension is basically the hypertension which is normal BP measured in hospital but elevated at home. So it's very hard to detect this type of hypertension. So it is just a named entity. So yes. Okay. So yes, I'll conclude the session on AC inhibitors and ARB here only.
Very good.
I hope the basics about AC inhibitors and ARBs are very clear.
And I think, you made it very clear that, between the ACE inhibitors and ARB, if you choose, it is always better.
Yes. So, yes, let's move on to irritable bowel syndrome. So, today we'll discuss about this.
It is a very interesting topic, and each and everybody sees it in any specialty there. I may be gynecologist, anybody may be surgeon. Anybody may be an orthopedic person, but you find these kind of personalities are there, and every doctor must be very clear about the irritable bowel syndrome, because certain things you can give, certain things you cannot give. You've got to understand their personality and treat accordingly. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So let's start a discussion on irritable bowel syndrome. I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Rahul Jain, and these sessions are happening under the guidance of Dr. Sharda Jain. So first, coming to definition of irritable bowel syndrome. So each and every word is very important. First of all, it is a functional disorder. It is not a structural, infective, or any disorder where there is any anomaly associated which is detectable by some investigations. So the definition only suggests it's a very simple criteria that it is a diagnosis of exclusion. That is, all my investigations should be normal to call a person as irritable bowel syndrome, suffering from irritable bowel syndrome. So first of all, it is a functional disorder. Then there should be no structural, infective, or biochemical abnormalities. So to define this point, I need to do all the investigation, and all the investigation should be normal. That is, there should be no infection, no colonoscopy, my sigmoidoscopy, or for that matter, all the tests should be normal. Then the second part of the definition is, it is characterized by abdominal pain, discomfort, and altered bowel habits. So if we break this line, basically I'll describe you how the scenario happens, that a person, more of the number of times it happens, like a person comes under emotional stress or any stress for that matter, and the person immediately feels pain in lower abdomen and he feels a need or urge to defecate, and the moment he passes his stools, that abdominal pain or discomfort disappears. So this is the classical history of irritable bowel syndrome. So it fits well in the definition, that is, it is a functional disorder, no detectable abnormality, that is, all investigations are normal, and clinical scenario is patient comes under stress, feels lower abdominal pain, defecate, and that pain disappears. So this definition is very important to remember and diagnose irritable bowel syndrome, and the criteria is Rome 4, that also we will discuss. The irritable bowel syndrome is of two types. So many people just think like it is a diarrhea type, and the person feels have symptoms of diarrhea during the episode of irritable bowel syndrome. But there's one more category inside it, that is constipation. So some people suffer from constipation as well. Only most of the time they will suffer from constipation whenever they are under emotional stress. So
there's a third variety that sometimes they have constipation, sometimes they have diarrhea.
Yes, it is called as mixed variety. Yes, mixed variety. So going on to pathophysiology. So there have been few hypotheses and few reasons have been given. So first is visceral hypersensitivity. It has been seen that the receptors which act on reflexes over the gastrocolic reflex and the defecation reflex and all this, those receptors become very sensitive. So that's why they have an exaggerated response. And second point is abnormal psychological features. So many times it has been found that there is an underlying anxiety. Patient is suffering from anxiety, patient is suffering from depression, or maybe low psychosis. So low grade psychosis. So we always need to advise a patient to get himself checked for mental health. So if they're suffering from any mental health issues, irritable bowel syndrome won't be controlled unless that mental health has been taken care of. So a psychiatric referral can be done for the patients if they have associated anxiety or maybe underlying mild depression. In psychiatry, we refer it as dysthymia, low mood. So then altered intestinal flora. So one of the few, one more things which were noted in the pathophysiology of irritable bowel syndrome was intestinal flora was altered. So yes, that's why we also advise them to eat all the probiotics and prebiotics food, and which ask them to avoid fatty foods. And then in rare cases, post-infectious irritable bowel syndrome has also been seen. That is, the person suffers from Salmonella and Shigella, and after that they suffer from these things. Moreover, the treatment remains same. Then going to clinical features. So already, as I discussed, that the regular clinical scenario is that person first suffers from abdominal pain. That abdominal pain is in the lower abdomen. So either of the iliac fossas or even in the hypogastrium. So there is a location of that abdominal pain. Then it gets aggravated whenever the patient is under emotional stress or if the patient has some stress going on in the life. And then when the patient passes the stool, he feels relieved. So in few books of psychiatry, it might be mentioned that it is a technique a patient diverts his mind from his psychological problems for that moment. And then coming to so abdominal pain which gets relieved by defecation can be through that can be an altered bowel habit. It can be constipation, it can be diarrhea. So that we have already discussed that there are two types, and the third type is mixed type. So predominant constipation or predominant diarrhea and mixed type. And there is always normal physical examination except the tenderness associated in either of iliac fossa and hypogastrium. And in the end, the one point is very important, that all the investigations are normal. So before telling someone that you have irritable bowel syndrome, we need to perform these investigations, and these investigations should not show any abnormality. Then only we can say someone has irritable bowel syndrome, because these symptoms can also be symptoms of some serious disease. So even can be symptoms of inflammatory diseases, or even if it's an elderly, then can be disease of even carcinoma. So CBC, stool examination, colonoscopy, sigmoidoscopy, and barium enema. So these investigations have to be done first. So the latest criteria for diagnosing irritable bowel syndrome is Rome 4 criteria. So Rome 4 criteria says the pain, the abdominal pain which is occurring, the classical abdominal pain should be occurring 1 day per week for the 3 months, and the incidence should have started 6 months back at least. And the 3 symptoms which are associated patient should have 2. The first, he should have pain, and then the stool frequency should change. That is either the normal frequency is more than 3, less than 3 per day, to minimum 3 per week for calling someone constipation or diarrhea. So change in that frequency or change in the form of stool. So we have something called as Bristol stool chart. So yes, here is the stool chart. So this is very important. So when we talk about normal stools, we say it is either type 4 or type 5. But in these people, when we say change in form of stools, we say either the stools have become type 1 or type 2. So type 1 are very hard stools, and or when we say type 6 or type 7, that is that we say in the case of very soft stools. So even as for gastroenterologists, they will grade the stools of a patient based on the Bristol stool chart only. So this chart becomes standard.
Very good.
So normal stools are normally 4 or 5. Type 4 or type 5, that is soft blob with clear cut edges, and they are passed easily. No one is yes. Then coming to treatment for irritable bowel syndrome. So I hope definition just revision definition is very simple. Functional disorder, no abnormalities which are detected on investigation. The classical clinical feature is patient suffers from abdominal pain, defecate or have constipation or diarrhea, and the symptoms disappear for that moment. And then what is important is always most of the time associated with underlying psychological problem. So underlying anxiety and or underlying low mood or maybe depression. So that should be addressed as well, and that will be the ultimate cure actually for irritable bowel syndrome. Then clinical features already discussed. Investigation should be normal. Rome 4 criteria. Change in the stool form, that is Bristol either type 1 or 2 or type 6 or 7, and normal is type 4 and type 5. Then coming to treatment in the end. So first is dietary restriction. So we have something called as FODMAP, that is fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So if many times what happens is irritable bowel syndrome patient also suffers from lot of flatulence and lot of bloating sensation. So we ask them to avoid any products which are fermentable, so that the gas formation is reduces, and they do not suffer from symptoms like bloating and flatulence. Then also avoiding the fruits which can cause flatulence, so beans, sprouts, alcohol, bagels, even caffeine. Again, minimizing the fatty food intake and regular physical activity. And then since one of the pathophysiology is altering intestinal flora, so we will ask them to take prebiotic foods such as curd, yogurt to maintain their intestinal flora. And we should always, this is very important, psychiatric referral if there is underlying any anxiety or low mood disorder. And in the end, I will just cover medication. So yes, if it's a constipation predominant irritable bowel syndrome, the treatment will be different, and if it's a diarrhea predominant irritable bowel syndrome, the treatment will be different. So in our diarrhea discussion, we have discussed few drugs like loperamide and diphenoxylate, and we say, and even antispasmodic. So we say they are not to be given in case of infectious diarrhea. So they are actually ideal choice for diarrhea predominant irritable bowel syndrome. So this is where they are actually preferred to these anti-diarrheals, loperamide and diphenoxylate. Then for constipation predominant irritable bowel syndrome, it is the fibers, the prokinetics to increase the gut motility, cisapride and mosapride. If there is pain, then we can give antispasmodic even for diarrhea predominant, for constipation predominant, and antidepressants are very important. So then, yes, it has been seen that ondansetron has been useful in diarrhea, predominant irritable bowel syndrome. It is used for vomiting normally, but it is seen that it reduces pain, it reduces rectal relaxation, rectal compliance. So if the rectal compliance increases, the storage of bowels will increase and the patient's frequency will come down. So yes, so I hope the treatment is clear.
अच्छा, तो इसके मतलब एमसेट वगैरह तो इसको देना है ऑन सिट्रॉन, ये जो है ना ऑनडन सिट्रॉन वाले ग्रुप है,
Yes, ma'am, MSET.
देना पड़ेगा.
Yes, yes. So we can give loperamide and diphenoxylate for diarrhea. We know it is a diarrhea. It's just psychogenic diarrhea. So it's very much preferred here, the loperamide and diphenoxylate. But the ultimate treatment will be to treat the underlying cause, like why the person is getting stressed. The stress controls become very important. So if it's not very severe, then meditation and sleep techniques, relaxation techniques will help a lot.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Excuse me, Dr. Rahul.
Yes.
Since you mentioned that antidepressants are a part of treatment in predominant constipation type, so we need not give them in the predominant diarrheal type. Or
Actually, they both actually.
Antidepressants have to be started after a good psychological workup of the patient, and the psychiatrist must see before
Yes.
any antidepressant should be started. Physicians putting antidepressant left and right is not desirable, because these people have to change on the personality. They must know the stress management. Whenever they have a problem and they look, they have a fire area, whenever there is a stress, तो आपको या तो फ्लाइट होगा या फाइट होगा. फाइट ये कर नहीं सकते, तो ये फ्लाइट के अंदर ये वाला इनका चेंजेस शुरू हो जाते हैं.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So
फाइटिंग टाइप.
this is very important, ma'am, that no physician other than psychiatrist should give antidepressant or antipsychotics, because for the simple reason that we don't know what are the subtle symptoms of these disorders. So a psychiatrist only should start these drugs and he should regularly monitor them. I've just mentioned it for completion's sake, that you should know.
उसमें जब आपने लिखा है ना एंटीडिप्रेसेंट्स, उसके बराबर में लिखना है कि they must be prescribed by the psychiatrist and not by physicians.
Yes, yes.
लिखना जरूरी है, क्योंकि अदरवाइज तो लोग लेंगे कोई भी दवाई लगा देंगे. तो before you finally leave it, you must see that you take that particular correction is very important. These people, they must be taught. इसी में treatment में लिखेंगे कि they must be taught stress management classes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Ma'am, there is one more interesting thing I just like to add here. Like, I found it interesting. There's something called as paradoxical suicide. So what happens that when person is depressed and we start the person on antidepressants, it has been seen that in initial few weeks there is probability that person will do suicide is more. So why it is like that when a person is depressed, he is low on energy and low on mood. But whenever we start antidepressant, it is the energy which improves first and not the mood. So the moment he gets more energy, but the mood is still low, so he can dare to do a suicide. So it is always to be started under the guidance of a psychiatrist. This is also one reason.
Yes. These are, whenever you take a score of depression, you also take a score of self-assessment score for suicide. And there are personalities. My daughter says, there are people to be staying single, both men and women.